The ship's heartbeat changed 3 hours before everything ended. I want you to understand that first because it matters. Everyone who survived long enough to speak about what happened, they all talked about the breach, the screaming, the way reality folded in on itself like wet paper. But I was the one who noticed it first. That subtle wrongness in the rhythm of the plasma reactors, that half-second hesitation in the thrum that had been my constant companion for 11 years aboard the Resolute Sovereign. 11 years of feeling that pulsed through the deck plates, through my bunk, through my bones during sleep cycles. 11 years until I knew that ship's heartbeat better than my own. And 3 hours before the Sorcerer tore open the sky, the heartbeat skipped. My name is Marcus Reinhold. I served as Senior Gunnery Chief aboard the Resolute Sovereign, a battle cruiser of the line assigned to Battle Fleet Obscurus. I am recording this testimony because the Commissariat has demanded it, because the Inquisition will want to know, and because I need someone to understand that what happened was not random, it was not chance. The archenemy did not simply stumble upon us in the void, they were invited. I have been awake for what I believe is 73 hours. The Medicae servitors keep trying to sedate me, but I fight them off because sleep means dreaming, and dreaming means seeing it all again. The breach, the colors that have no names, the face of Chief Navigator Elena Vasquez as she dissolved into mathematics. So I will stay awake, and I will tell you everything, and then whatever happens to me will happen. The Resolute Sovereign was a proud vessel, 2 kilometers of adamantine and faith, crew complement of 37,000 souls, enough firepower to crack a moon. I had served aboard her since my conscription from the hive world Callistra Prime, working my way up from powder monkey to gunnery rating to finally the position of senior chief. My domain was the port-side macro cannon batteries, 16 guns, each capable of hurling shells the size of hab blocks across the void. I knew every loading mechanism, every elevation spirit, every temperamental machine that required specific prayers before it would consent to function. The master of ordnance, a stern woman named Captain Sarah Thornton, had once told me I had an instinct for the guns. That they spoke to me. I wish now that they had warned me. The skip in the heartbeat happened during third watch. I was in my quarters reviewing ammunition manifests, the endless paperwork that accompanies any position of responsibility in His Majesty's Navy, requisition forms for propellant charges, maintenance schedules for the loading servitors, a disciplinary report on a rating named Jensen, who had been caught sleeping during his shift, mundane concerns. The concerns of a man who believed he would grow old doing this work, who imagined himself eventually retiring to some backwater station to train the next generation of gunners. The concerns of a man who did not know that in 3 hours he would watch his captain's skin turn inside out. When the heartbeat skipped, I set down my stylus and listened. The plasma reactors powered everything aboard the Resolute Sovereign, and their rhythm was as constant as the rotation of worlds. 62 beats per minute, perfectly synchronized, never varying by more than a fraction of a fraction. The engineers of the machine cult maintained that rhythm with religious devotion, and in 11 years I had never heard it falter. But it faltered then. A single beat, stretched just slightly too long. A pause where there should have been continuation. And in that pause I felt something I cannot adequately describe, except to say it was like being watched by something vast and eyeless. I activated my personal Vox unit and contacted the engine deck. A junior tech priest named Acolyte Mitchell-7 answered, his voice filtered through the clicking of his mechanical larynx. Gunnery Chief Reinhold, how may I serve the Omnissiah's will? The reactors, I said. There was an irregularity, a skip in the rhythm, silence on the Vox, the kind of silence that meant someone was checking readouts, consulting the machine spirits, performing the small rituals of verification that the Mechanicus used instead of simply looking at things. All systems nominal. Gunnery Chief. Plasma output steady at 94.7%. No deviation recorded in the sacred logs. I heard it, Acolyte. The beat was wrong. Human auditory perception is imperfect, Mitchell-7 replied, and I could hear the condescension in his mechanical voice, the certainty that flesh was inferior to the blessed metal. The Omnissiah's instruments detect no anomaly. Perhaps you require rest. I almost accepted that explanation, almost convinced myself that 11 years of listening to that heartbeat had made me oversensitive, prone to imagining problems where none existed. But something made me ask one more question, a question that would haunt me for whatever remains of my life. Acolyte, has anyone accessed the primary reactor shrine in the last standard day? Anyone outside your order? Another silence, longer this time. That information is restricted, Gunnery Chief. I am not authorized to discuss the sacred spaces with the uninitiated. He terminated the connection before I could press further. I should have reported it to Captain Thornton immediately. I should have gone to the bridge and demanded an investigation. Instead, I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that the stress of the upcoming engagement with archenemy forces in the Valdric system was making me see shadows where there was only darkness. I returned to my manifests. I signed off on Jensen's disciplinary action. I prepared for sleep. 2 hours and 47 minutes later, the sorcerer opened the sky. I was in the gun chapel of Battery 7 when it happened, performing the evening blessing with my crew. 63 men and women, kneeling before the great brass aquila that hung above the loading mechanisms, reciting the litany of accurate fire while I anointed the breech locks with consecrated oil. This was our ritual, our small act of faith in a universe that cared nothing for faith. The guns were our purpose. The guns were our salvation. We whispered their names and they whispered back, and in that communion we found meaning. The first indication that something was wrong came from the lights. They did not simply fail. That I could have understood, could have processed as a mundane malfunction in a ship full of mundane malfunctions. Instead, they began to pulse in a rhythm that was not the ship's rhythm, a beat that seemed to come from somewhere outside the hull, somewhere that should not have existed. Faster and faster, strobing, and with each flash, the shadows in the gun chapel stretched in directions that had no names. Rating First Class Derek Holbrook was the first to scream. He was a young man, barely 20 standard years, with a wife in the lower decks and a child he had never met. He had joined my battery 6 months earlier, and I had been training him to become a loader prime. He was promising. He paid attention. He asked the right questions. When he screamed, I turned to see his shadow detaching from the deck. It peeled up like old paint, a flat darkness that somehow found depth, that somehow grew a thickness it should not have possessed. And as it rose, it took shape, a shape that was almost human but too long in the limbs, too fluid in its movements, with a face that was all teeth and hunger. Derek's shadow turned to look at him, and he stopped screaming because his throat had forgotten how to make sounds, and then the shadow reached into his chest and pulled out something that glowed. I want to be clear about what I saw. I want the Inquisition to understand that I am not speaking in metaphors. The shadow thing pulled a light from Derek's chest, a soft luminescence that guttered and flickered like a candle in wind, and it put that light into its mouth, and it swallowed. Derek collapsed, still breathing but somehow less, somehow emptied, and his eyes when they found mine were the eyes of a servitor, present but unoccupied. The light stopped pulsing. For a single, horrible moment, everything was still. Then the ship's heartbeat, that rhythm I had known for 11 years, changed completely. It became something else. It became words. The beat was words, spoken in a frequency that human ears should not have been able to perceive, but I perceived them anyway. And they were not in any language I knew, but I understood them perfectly. They were an invitation. They were a welcome. They were the sound of a door being opened from both sides at once. Gunnery stations, I shouted, because shouting orders was what I knew, was the only response my training permitted. Battle positions, move. My crew moved, those who could still move, those whose shadows had not yet awakened. They scrambled for their positions, even as the walls of the gun chapel began to sweat a substance that was not oil, not blood, but something in between. The loading servitors activated without orders, their mechanical arms cycling through patterns that served no tactical purpose, lifting shells and setting them down, lifting and setting down, as if they were worshipping some algorithm that had infected their programming. I ran for the Vox station at the chapel's entrance. The panel was sparking, its machine spirit clearly distressed, but I managed to establish a connection to the bridge. Captain Thornton, this is Gunnery Chief Reinhold. We have a situation in Battery 7. Static. The kind of static that sounds like whispers if you listen too closely. I was about to repeat my hail when a voice came through, but it was not the captain's voice. It was male, deep, resonant with power that made my teeth ache. Your captain is indisposed, Chief Reinhold. She is currently learning a new arrangement of her internal organs. Would you like to speak with her? I can arrange it. I can arrange so many things. I did not respond. I could not respond. My throat had closed around words that refused to form. You noticed, didn't you? The voice continued, and I could hear something like amusement in it, something like satisfaction. The heartbeat. You heard it skip. You have good ears, Chief Reinhold, good instincts. It is almost a shame that you will not survive the night. Almost. The connection died in a burst of feedback that felt like fingers scraping across the inside of my skull. I stood there, gripping the Vox panel, while behind me my crew fought shadows that had come alive and loading servitors that had begun to use their mechanical arms as weapons. I stood there and I understood, finally, what was happening. The sorcerer had not attacked our ship. He had not needed to. He had simply walked aboard during our last resupply stop at Port Ardennes, probably wearing the face of a rating or a pilgrim or a minor administratum clerk. He had walked aboard, and he had gone to the reactor shrine, and he had done something to the heartbeat of our vessel. He had turned the plasma reactors into a summoning circle. The Resolute Sovereign was not under attack. The Resolute Sovereign was becoming the attack. I grabbed my service las pistol and ran, not toward my crew, though it shames me to admit it, not toward the sounds of screaming and tearing metal and the wet, eager noises of things feeding. I ran toward the bridge because the bridge had the ship's self-destruct protocols, and because, if I could not save the Resolute Sovereign, I could at least ensure she did not become a weapon in the hands of the archenemy. The corridors were wrong. That is the only way I can describe them. The geometry had not changed, the deck plans were still accurate, but the spaces between locations had grown elastic. A passage that should have taken 30 seconds to traverse stretched into minutes, into what felt like hours, while other passages compressed so severely that I found myself stepping through doorways before I had finished opening them. I passed crew members in various stages of transformation. Some were fighting, their faith a shield against the corruption that leaked from every surface. Others had surrendered, their bodies reshaping themselves according to designs that honored no anatomy I recognized. I saw a ratings chief named Carter kneeling before a wall that had begun to display images, moving images of places that existed only in nightmare, and his hands were raised in supplication while his back grew new joints. I saw a young ensign, whose name I never learned, using her own fingers to write symbols on the corridor walls, symbols that squirmed when you looked at them directly. I did not stop. I could not stop. The bridge was everything. The self-destruct was everything. If I could reach Deck 1, if I could input my senior officer codes, if I could speak the words of annihilation before the sorcerer completed his work, then perhaps this story would end differently. The lift systems were not functioning, so I took the maintenance ladders between decks. 47 levels from the gun deck to the bridge, each one a journey through increasing wrongness. By Deck 23, the walls had stopped pretending to be metal. They were flesh now, warm and yielding, with veins that pulsed in rhythm with the new heartbeat, the word heartbeat, the invitation heartbeat. By Deck 15, the air itself had changed, becoming thick with spores that tasted of copper and regret. I wrapped a rag around my face and kept climbing. On Deck 10, I found Elena Vasquez. The chief navigator was hanging in the center of a corridor, suspended by nothing visible, her body curved into a shape that suggested immense pain had preceded immense stillness. Her eyes were open, and they were no longer eyes in any meaningful sense. They were windows into somewhere else, somewhere that I could not look at directly without feeling my sanity begin to slide. "Marcus," she said, though her mouth did not move, "I can see the warp now. I can see it without my hood, without my instruments. It is beautiful, Marcus. It is so beautiful. Would you like to see?" I raised my las pistol. I do not know what I intended to do with it. Shoot her, shoot myself? The weapon felt small and foolish in my hand, a child's toy in a universe of giants. The sorcerer, I managed. Where is the sorcerer? Elena's mouth finally moved, curving into a smile that was too wide for her face, that used muscles her face had not possessed before this moment. He is everywhere now. He is the ship. He is the heartbeat. He is the invitation that we all accepted without knowing. Did you not feel it, Marcus, when you first came aboard 11 years ago? Did you not feel the seed he planted in you, in all of us? I ran. I left her hanging there, speaking mathematics to the corrupted air, and I ran, because her words had touched something in my memory, something I had buried so deep that I had forgotten it existed. 11 years ago, on my first day aboard the Resolute Sovereign, I had experienced a moment of disorientation during the embarkation ritual. A skip in time, a gap in my memory, perhaps 30 seconds that I could not account for. I had attributed it to nerves, to the stress of a new posting. I had never thought about it again until Elena's words dragged it back into the light. 30 seconds. What could happen in 30 seconds? What could be planted, what seeds could be sown in the space between heartbeats? I reached Deck 5 before the sorcerer found me. He was waiting in the auxiliary command corridor, standing perfectly still while the ship reconfigured itself around him. His armor was ancient, covered in sigils that hurt to perceive, and his face was hidden beneath a helm that was all angles and hunger. But it was his staff that commanded my attention, a length of twisted metal topped with what I can only describe as a captured star, a point of light so bright that it should have blinded me but instead illuminated everything, including things I did not want to see. "Chief Reinhold," he said, and his voice was the voice from the Vox, the voice that had spoken through the ship's bleeding systems. "I wondered if you would make it this far." Most of the others gave up around Deck 30. They are part of the walls now, part of the new geometry, but you kept climbing, you kept fighting. I find that admirable. I fired my last pistol. The last bolt crossed the space between us, a brief streak of red energy that represented everything humanity had learned about warfare, about death, about the desperate need to destroy that which threatened us. The sorcerer caught it. He reached out with his gauntleted hand, and he caught the last bolt, and he held it between his fingers while it flickered and died, and then he dropped the cooling residue to the deck with a small sound of disappointment. "Faith," he said. "That is what you were taught, was it not? Faith in the Emperor, faith in the Imperium, faith in your weapons and your comrades and your cause. But faith is just another form of energy, Chief Reinhold, and energy can be harvested, redirected, used for purposes its originators never intended." "What do you want?" I asked, because I needed to understand, because my mind was refusing to accept annihilation without at least comprehending why. The sorcerer tilted his head, a gesture that was almost human, almost curious. "Want? I want what every servant of the true gods wants. Change, transformation, evolution beyond the limitations of flesh and faith. But this ship, this particular ship, has a special purpose. Do you know where we are, Chief Reinhold? Do you know what lies beyond the hull at this very moment?" I did not know. The translation from real space to the immaterium happened without my awareness, part of the navigator's mysterious communion with forces that mundane crew were not meant to understand. "We entered the warp 6 hours ago," the sorcerer continued. "Your dear departed navigator guided us in, following her usual routes, her usual protocols, but I made certain alterations to those protocols, subtle changes to the Astronomicon readings, minor adjustments to the translation coordinates, and now we are precisely where I need us to be." He gestured with his staff, and the walls of the corridor became transparent, became windows into the space outside the ship's Geller field. What I saw there, I will never be able to describe with words that convey the full horror. The warp was not emptiness, it was fullness, an ocean of color and movement and thought, and the things swimming in that ocean were looking at us. Looking at me. Faces the size of worlds, eyes that contained galaxies of malevolence, reaching appendages that could have wrapped around the Resolute Sovereign like a child clutching a toy. "The veil is thin here. the sorcerer said. Thinner than anywhere else in the segmentum. The perfect storm, my masters call it. A confluence of currents that allows for certain, let us say, introductions. And your ship, Chief Reinhold, with its 37,000 faithful souls, with its 11 years of accumulated prayers and devotions and little acts of service, is the perfect sacrifice, the perfect invitation. You are going to feed us to them. My voice was calm, calmer than I had any right to be. The daemons. You are going to drop the Geller field and let them in. No, no, nothing so crude. The sorcerer almost sounded offended. I am going to do something far more elegant. I am going to let them become us. The ship will serve as a vessel in every sense of the word. 37,000 souls transformed into 37,000 doorways. A fleet of the damned, wearing the faces of the loyal, sailing back into imperial space with holds full of corruption and hearts full of hunger. Imagine it, Chief Reinhold. Imagine your battle cruiser joining a defensive formation, taking position alongside its sister vessels, and then, at the perfect moment, becoming something else entirely. I understood then. I understood the true horror of what he was describing. The resolute sovereign would not be destroyed, she would be perverted. And everyone aboard, every soul who had prayed and fought and believed, would become an instrument of the enemy they had sworn to destroy, including me, including whatever seed had been planted in my mind 11 years ago, waiting for this moment to blossom. Why tell me this, I asked. Why explain your plan to someone who might stop you? The sorcerer laughed. It was not a human laugh. It was the sound of realities grinding against each other, of certainties collapsing into doubt. Stop me? Chief Reinhold, you are part of my plan. You have been part of my plan since before you were born. The seed I planted in you, in all the others, it requires a final catalyst to fully awaken. It requires the understanding of what you are becoming. It requires your awareness of the transformation. Without that awareness, the process is incomplete. You would become a simple daemon vessel, a puppet without purpose. But now that you understand, now that you have fought your way here against impossible odds, you will become something beautiful, something with agency, something that will spread the infection not through mindless violence but through choice, through mission, through duty. He stepped closer to me, and I found that I could not move, could not even raise my useless pistol. The air around him was heavy with potential, with the weight of futures that had already been written. You will be the captain of this vessel, he said. Not me. I am merely the catalyst. You, Marcus Reinhold, with your 11 years of service, with your instincts for the guns, with your good ears and your stubborn faith, you will lead the resolute sovereign back to imperial space. You will answer hails in your own voice. You will submit to inspections with your own face. And when the time comes, you will open 37,000 doorways to the realm of my masters. I will die first. Of course you will. That is part of the process. Death and then rebirth, and then the understanding that death and rebirth are the same thing, endlessly recurring, endlessly transformable. Your emperor promises you an afterlife of rest. My masters offer something far more valuable. They offer you an afterlife of purpose. He raised his staff, and the captured star at its apex blazed with light that was not light, with radiance that illuminated nothing external but everything internal. I felt it moving through me, finding the seed that had been planted so long ago, nurturing it, encouraging it to grow, and as it grew, I felt my sense of self beginning to fragment, to dissolve into a chorus of voices that had been waiting, patient and hungry, for this exact moment. But I also felt something else, something the sorcerer had not anticipated, something that rose up from the 11 years of service, the 11 years of prayers, the 11 years of standing before guns that had whispered secrets to me I had never consciously understood. The guns, the machines, the ship itself. I had been told long ago by an old rating who died of lung rot in the Medicae Bay that a ship knows its crew, that a vessel of the Imperial Navy, consecrated and blessed and filled with the faith of thousands, develops something like a spirit, something like a will. I had dismissed it as superstition then, the comforting mythology of those who spent their lives trapped in metal wombs between the stars. But now, feeling the seed try to blossom inside my mind, I reached for that mythology. I reached for the ship, and the ship reached. The resolute sovereign was not dead. She was transformed, corrupted, her heartbeat stolen and her geometry perverted, but somewhere in the vast complexity of her systems, in the machine's spirits that had served the Imperium for centuries before I was born, something remained, something loyal, something that recognized me as it had recognized the old rating, as it recognized all the crew who had given their lives to her guns and her engines and her endless voyage through the dark. The guns began to fire. Not the macro cannons, those needed crews to operate them, and the crews were dead or transformed or hiding in pockets of diminishing sanity throughout the vessel. But the automated defense turrets, the point defense systems designed to destroy torpedoes and attack craft, those answered my call. They swiveled inward, targeting not external threats but internal ones, and they began to shoot. Las fire scorched through corridors. Autocannon shells punched through bulkheads. The ship began to destroy itself from the inside out, and I felt each shot as a prayer, as a benediction, as a final act of faith in the face of impossible corruption. The sorcerer screamed, not in pain, not exactly, but in frustration, in the recognition that his carefully constructed plan was collapsing around him. The light from his staff flickered, faltered, and for a moment, just a moment, I was myself again. Fully and completely, Marcus Reinhold, gunnery chief of the resolute sovereign, man of the Imperium, servant of the God Emperor. I pulled the trigger on my last pistol. This time, the sorcerer did not catch the bolt. This time, it struck him in the chest, not penetrating his ancient armor but forcing him back, disrupting his concentration. And in that disruption, the ship found new strength. Systems that had been offline roared back to life. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, compartmentalizing the corruption, and deep in the engineering deck, something that might have been an engine seer or might have been a machine's spirit, or might have been the ghost of the ship itself reached out and began to execute the scrap code termination protocols. The heartbeat changed again. The words stopped. The rhythm became something new, something I had never heard before. A beat that was neither human nor demonic, but something in between. A heart that was dying but refusing to die quietly. The sorcerer fled. I do not know where he went or how he escaped the ship. Perhaps he dissolved back into the warp that had spawned him. Perhaps he found a shuttle and translated away. Perhaps he simply ceased to exist in any form I could comprehend. All I know is that one moment he was there, screaming and burning with reflected las fire, and the next moment I was alone in the corridor, surrounded by walls that were beginning to remember they were supposed to be metal. I reached the bridge 6 hours later. By then, the worst of the transformation had reversed, though scars remained everywhere. Crew members who had begun to change found themselves frozen mid-mutation, their bodies neither what they had been nor what they were becoming. Servitors that had gone mad now stood silent, their mechanical arms locked in the last positions they had occupied before the ship's spirit reasserted control, and the warp outside, the perfect storm with its watching eyes and reaching hands, had begun to recede as the resolute sovereign dragged herself towards something that might have been real space. Captain Thornton was on the bridge. Her skin had indeed turned inside out, as the sorcerer had promised, but she was still alive, still functioning, still giving orders in a voice that now came from somewhere other than her mouth. She looked at me with organs that were not eyes, and she said something I will never forget. "The guns saved us." I nodded. I could not speak. The seed in my mind was still there, still waiting, but it was dormant now, suppressed by the ship's will, by the faith that had been invested in these systems for centuries. I was not free. I would never be free. But I was not yet lost. "How did you know?" Thornton asked. "How did you know the ship would respond?" I thought about the old rating and his superstitions. I thought about 11 years of prayers before guns that whispered back. I thought about the heartbeat that had skipped, the warning I had been given and almost ignored. "I listened," I said. "I just listened." We emerged from the warp 3 days later, in a system far from our intended destination, our engines crippled, and our crew reduced to less than 2,000 functional souls. The distress beacon brought Navy vessels, and the Navy vessels brought Inquisitors, and the Inquisitors brought questions that I have been answering ever since. They want to know everything, every detail, every moment, every whisper of corruption that I witnessed or experienced. They have scanned me 100 times, performed rituals over my body, had psychers probe the depths of my mind. They found the seed there, the dormant infection that the sorcerer planted so long ago. They say they can remove it, but they are not sure what will remain of me afterward. They are not sure I will still be capable of being Marcus Reinhold. I told them to do it anyway, because I know the truth now. I know that the sorcerer was not unique, that there are others like him planting seeds throughout the Imperium, waiting for the right moment to make their victims bloom. I know that the resolute sovereign was not the only ship marked for transformation, that somewhere out there, other vessels sail with corrupted hearts, their crews unknowing hosts to parasites that will one day devour them from within. And I know that I cannot be trusted, not anymore. The seed may be dormant, but it is not dead. Every night, when I close my eyes, I hear its whisper. It tells me about the purpose I was promised. It tells me about the beautiful transformation I denied myself. It tells me that, sooner or later, I will understand, I will accept, I will become what I was always meant to become. The Inquisitors are right to be cautious. The Inquisitors are right to keep me isolated, to monitor my every word and thought, to prepare for the possibility that their scans and rituals have failed. If I were them, I would have executed me already. The risk is too great, the contamination too deep. But they did not execute me. They are keeping me alive for a reason they have not explained, and I suspect it has something to do with the connection I formed with the resolute sovereign in those final moments. They want to understand how a gunnery chief with no psychic ability, no special training, no particular value to the Imperium, managed to commune with a ship's spirit strongly enough to weaponize its automated defenses. They want to know if that ability can be replicated, if it can be taught, if it can be used against the enemy. I want to know too, because even with the seed inside me, even with the whispers every night and the visions of transformation, I am still Marcus Reinhold. I am still a servant of the God Emperor. And if there is a way to fight the archenemy with their own weapons turned against them, if there is a way to make ships themselves into warriors against corruption, then perhaps my damnation will have been worth something, perhaps the 11 years of listening, of praying, of standing before guns that whispered secrets was preparation for something I never imagined. The resolute sovereign is being refitted even now. The Mechanicus priests have declared her purified, though I know they are wrong. You cannot purify what has been touched by the warp. You can only suppress it, contain it, build walls around the infection and pray that those walls hold. The ship knows this. I felt her understanding in those final moments, her acceptance that she would never be clean again but could still be useful, could still serve, could still fight. We are alike. Now, the resolute sovereign and I, damaged beyond repair but refusing to die, corrupted beyond purification but clinging to purpose, we are weapons that have been turned, blades that have tasted enemy steel and survived, and we will either serve the Imperium or be destroyed trying. The Inquisitors have given me a choice. Execution with full honors, my record purged of any mention of corruption, or continued service under their direct supervision with the understanding that I will be terminated the moment the seed shows any sign of awakening. They want an asset they can deploy against the enemy. They want someone who has seen the transformation process from the inside and survived. They want a gunnery chief who can talk to ships. I chose service. Of course I chose service. What else is there for a man like me? What else has there ever been? Tomorrow they will begin the procedure to suppress the seed. They say it will be painful. They say I will lose memories, perhaps years of my life, perhaps more. They say there is a chance I will not survive at all. I told them to do it anyway, because I will not become what the sorcerer wanted me to become. I will not be a doorway. I will not be an invitation. I have spent my entire life serving the guns, serving the ship, serving the Imperium that created me and will almost certainly destroy me. And if that service requires my death, my mutilation, the erasure of everything that makes me who I am, then so be it. The Emperor protects. That is what we are taught from the moment we are old enough to understand language. The Emperor protects, and his protection is absolute, eternal, unquestionable. But on the resolute sovereign, in those moments when the sorcerer's plan was collapsing and the ship was fighting to save itself, I learned a different truth. A truth that the ecclesiarchy would call heresy, but that I know in my bones is real. Sometimes the Emperor does not protect. Sometimes we have to protect ourselves. Sometimes the only faith that matters is the faith we place in each other, in the ships that carry us, in the guns that we have sworn to serve and that have sworn, in their own mechanical way, to serve us. The sorcerer is still out there. I know this. I feel it sometimes in the moments between sleeping and waking, a presence at the edge of my consciousness, waiting, patient, certain that I will eventually succumb. He has time. Chaos has infinite time. And mortals, even mortals who have been touched by corruption and survived, are finite. But finite does not mean worthless. Finite does not mean defeated. Finite means that every moment matters, that every choice carries weight, that every act of resistance is a prayer more powerful than any liturgy. I am Marcus Reinhold. I served as senior gunnery chief aboard the Resolute Sovereign. I witnessed a Chaos Sorcerer open a warp rift in the heart of an Imperial Battle Cruiser, and I survived. I carry a seed of corruption that may one day destroy me, and I have chosen to spend whatever time remains fighting the enemies who planted it. This is my testimony, this is my confession, this is my prayer. The guns are silent now, but they are still listening, and so am I. The heartbeat continues, different than before, changed forever, but still beating. And as long as it beats, as long as the ship lives, as long as there are crew willing to listen to the whispers of machines that have served the Imperium for longer than any of us have been alive, there is hope. Not much hope. The grimdark reality of our galaxy does not permit much hope, but enough to keep fighting, enough to keep serving, enough to stand before the guns one more time and speak the litany of accurate fire into the endless void. May the Emperor judge my soul when the time comes. May he understand why I made the choices I made, and may he forgive me for the choices I have not yet made, the choices that lie ahead in the darkness between stars where his light does not reach. The procedure begins in 6 hours. I can hear them preparing, the Medici servitors and the inquisitorial chirurgeons and whatever Xenos technology they have decided to use on what remains of my mind. I am afraid, but I am ready. The guns will remember me, even if I cannot remember myself. The ship will remember me. And somewhere in the vast machinery of imperial bureaucracy, a record will exist of a gunnery chief who listened when no one else did, who fought when fighting seemed impossible, who chose to serve even when service meant sacrifice. That will be enough. It has to be enough. 62 beats per minute, the old rhythm, the rhythm I memorized over 11 years of faithful service. I can almost hear it now, beneath the damaged heartbeat of the wounded ship, beneath the whispers of the seed, beneath the preparations for my transformation into something that might save the Imperium or might damn it forever. 62 beats per minute, the prayer of machines, the faith of metal, the only truth that matters in a universe of lies. I am Marcus Reinhold, and I am still